Hello. It's the day before Christmas Eve here in the United States, December 23rd, 2021. And the world is what it is, peaceful for some and crazy for others. Hope it's peaceful for you. And coming into the holidays, at least for the Christian holidays, um, it's kind of an exciting time for a lot of people. Uh, so let's see, it's now. I always get nervous about 20 minutes before I do these lives because I think, well, this is a really good topic. And then by the time, about 20 minutes before I get on, I start going, what am I going to talk about? And what's the point of this? And who cares about this? And who is it? What's the relevance of this? So I start with it being a little bit nervous. So that's what you're seeing right now is what it's like for me when I'm nervous. So this month, December, the theme is living alone. And so far, we've talked about living alone by choice or living alone because of the consequences that you didn't have choice about. Perhaps your partner died, or because relationships were what they were that had you uh, have to live alone. Perhaps there was a divorce or separation. Perhaps you had to move to a different part of the country or the world, and so you had to leave. Perhaps there was some domestic violence or something that also had you to leave. So lots of reasons why people may be living alone, and the adjustment of that is pretty challenging, especially if you haven't chosen it. Um, the fact of the matter is there's about 36 million people who live alone. That's 28% of the American population live alone, and 27% of the people over 60 live alone. And again, some of that is by choice, and some of that is not by choice. So we've also talked about last week. I talked about what meaning we make about living alone. For some people, living alone means to them that there's something wrong with you, that you suck as an individual, that you don't have the capacity to live with other people, all kinds of things that we make meaning of. And so quite often in sort of an intention of this uh, live series on living alone, my intention is to support and empower you to look at how you are experiencing yourself living alone, or perhaps considering the possibility of living alone. How do you make the choices? What are the interpretations, the meaning that you make about um, this way of being in the world for a while, which is to live alone? So it's my intention is to support and empower you to think of this and be with this in a way that supports your heart, supports you, supports and aligns you with your highest truth and your highest knowing. And certainly there's a lot of fear that can come up, and there's a lot of grief that can come up, or loss, because of there's a change that's occurring if you're moving or transitioning from living with people to living alone, which in essence is what happens. Then there's a transition. And when we resist transitions, when we resist change, when we resist being with the truth of the situation, we can create suffering and pain for ourselves. We can create depression or apathy. So we can do any of and all of that. But when we are conscious of this process of choosing to live alone and choosing to live um, happily, if you will, living alone, being happy in this moment of being alone, that's a choice. And to then live into that choice to be happy is what we do. So my intention again is to support and empower you to think about, what is this about for you, and what is it that you're wanting to evolve into or experience because of the circumstances of living alone right now. So for me, when I started living alone when I was 27, I ended a marriage. It was traumatic because I had always lived with somebody and grew up in a very large family. And when I was alone, it was isolating, and I didn't know anybody where I moved. And it was probably a good 2 or 3 months before I had a grasp of how to function. I had a job, so I knew how to get to the job and get back. I was traumatized because I had left a marriage and children and all kinds of things. So getting to a job and back, and then living in this what felt isolated, it was a hard time. And fortunately, I developed some friendships, and fortunately, the people who lived across the hall from me in this apartment um, had mercy and kind of befriended me and made sure that I, wasn't isolating. So it was a challenge. But the truth is, now I'm in my 70th year, and the majority of my life I've spent living alone, even though part of that has been in relationship to people, long distance relationships, and being married, but living in different places separate from each other. So I've learned a lot by living alone, and I'm still learning a lot by living alone. I still have ideas that it would be maybe cool to live with people, a special person. But at the same time, I don't know that that's going to happen. Don't know. So, and another part of this conversation is that when we're in a sense, part of the intention is to say, quite often we live alone with an intention that this is transitional. This is I'm just between relationships, or I'm between something or other, and this is transitional, which it could be. But we could live in this transitional place and in a sense of state of waiting and a state of anticipating what's next, living in a state of daydreaming about the future, or being angry about the past or frustrated about the past or whatever. And we're not actually here in this experience. We're trying to get to what's next. And I did that for a long time. It's like this this is just until I get to the next relationship. And I was one of those first people who was a serial monogamist. I would go from one relationship to the next. So there's all kinds of ways that we're being with ourselves while we're in this living alone place. And for me, again, the intention is to support and empower you to look at what is it that you can gain from this experience of living alone, and how can you learn who you are, your own truth, your own style, your own preferences, your own, in a sense, your own resistances, your own contractions, where you're contracting as opposed to extending and expanding yourself. Where do you isolate? Where do you um, uh, keep yourself from actually living in your fulfillment, the fulfillment of your human spirit? And so living alone is a really good opportunity because you're the only one that's making choices for yourself and how your world looks, how your reality shows up. You may have a job, you may have friends and family close by, you may have a dog, you might have plants, you might have all kinds of things, but it's you becoming aware of the relationships that you're having with yourself in relation to others. So that's what I wanted to talk about today, is that though you're living alone, that doesn't mean that you are alone. It doesn't mean that you never see people. That you are reclusive. You might be, and you might be a person that is um, has some situations that keep you in a more reclusive state. But the majority of us have the capacities to grow our life or grow and expand ourselves to the degree that we want to. My idea, in being a transformational life coach and having worked in transformational work for a long time, my intention for working with my clients and myself and you is that you want to extend and expand yourself into your fullest, like I said, your fullest expression of who you are. And so here's an opportunity to notice when you are perhaps again becoming reclusive, or imploding or getting smaller, constricting, or where you can expand yourself into your fullest self. So so there's a lot going on for each and every one of us, and what I'm talking about will be unique to every single person. That what I'm saying may not fit you in the same way it might fit somebody else, but the idea is that you have the capacity to know what's true for you, and to look at where you might be limiting yourself from growing a capacity to love, to respect, to understand, to create all kinds of things like that, that you, each of us has a capacity to do. When we live alone, we have that space to choose to do that the way we want to do it for ourselves, to the degree that we do. When we're married or in partnership or in families, we might have less capacity to do that, but because of the needs of other people, or because our tendency to be with other people in a way that may not be able to serve ourselves the way that I'm talking about here, that we can when we're alone. When I live with people, well, that's not true. When I have lived with people, I have lost myself. When I lived on a sailboat for 2 years, and I had my job to do, my little job was, it would have taken 20 minutes of my day, maybe that much. But what I always focused on is what other people needed. So if somebody needed help doing something, I would go do that. Or somebody would say, I need to do this, and I would go do that. So I would be always tending to what other people needed. And that was true when I was married and living with my partner, or when I'm visiting my children, even. It's like, what do you need? What do you need? What do you need? What, my focus gets distracted, and I don't know, I don't take care of my own needs. My needs are my own stuff that needs to get done. So quite often I find myself happier and more fulfilled. Like, I get my things done when I'm alone, and that's what I know. Um, and learning when I am with people, learning to balance and learning to the boundaries of saying, no, I can't do that right now. I've got some other commitment I've got to take care of. That's a practice too that gets learned by living with other people. Didn't learn it me I didn't learn that very well when I was living with other people, but I see that now, because I just didn't have that capacity to set those boundaries and say, no, I've got my own thing I have to take care of right now. So the learning of who we are, and what's important to us, and how we want to be in the world is really important. And when we have that sense of that for ourselves, we can then be more at choice on how we want to be in relationship with ourselves in relation to others. So that's a really important thing. Like, how do I want to be in relationship with others? I want to be generous in my spirit. I want to be generous with myself. I want kindness, and I want, if I say I'm going to be present, I want to be present. If I say I'm going to take care of you, I want to take care of you. So I don't want to say that and then be distracted with whatever else I need to do. I saw a movie, and I don't remember the name of it, but it was about um, it was about this woman who was in recovery from addictions. Partly it was drug addictions, partly it was love addictions. And in the recovery center where she was at, one of the things they were talking about was, if you want to get in relationship, start with a plant. Uh, because if you can take care of a plant, that indicates that you have enough commitment to be present to that plant and make sure it thrives. And if you're good at that, then you might take on a dog or a cat or some other animal that you can relate with and take care of because it needs your attention. And then if you're good at that, then you may go to the next step of having a relationship with a person. People are very complex, very difficult to have relationships with people. We think it's normal. We think it should be easy. We think, oh, I love that person. I'll love them forever. It's going to be really great. But even though the love is there, companionship or compatibility could be off. And how we choose to be with people who confront us or aren't there for us is we have to learn to grow ourselves the capacity to understand and accept and move in the direction of fullness. So when you can start with a plant, then you're on your way. I have orchids. I have 3 orchids. It's funny. It's behind this plant. There's a beautiful orchid, and I love it. And one thing I know about orchids is they don't need a lot of attention. You know, when I first bought my first orchid, the fellow at the checkout stand said, "Treat it like you hate it." And basically, it doesn't need a lot of attention. But I love my orchids, and so I treat it like I hate it. I don't baby it. They don't like to be babied, but I give it what it needs to thrive. And that's a really wonderful thing because I get to enjoy the beauty of it. And I'm learning how to be in relationship with my desire for such beauty and that living thing and with myself. And I also took on, I have 3, happens to be 3 as well, fish tanks. Little, this one behind me, the light's not on, but it's little black. And there's a blue betta fish in there and some other fish in there. And then I have a little tank right here. It's 5-gallon and it's little shrimp, tiny little freshwater shrimp. And then I have a tank in the bathroom. So I have 3 and with really sweet little fish. And so these little tanks just make me happy. They bring me joy. The fish, I love them. I love watching them. And again, I'm the only one that feeds them. I'm the one that attends to them so they have fresh water. A little bit more difficult than a plant because you just give water and nutrients. Fish need to make sure that their water is the right amount of nitrogen, or I can't tell you what it is, but they need food. They need plants in a sense and oxygen, and they need clean water and good water. And they need something more than just a plant. So for me to take on and be committed to my fish is a bigger commitment. And at times when my fish, I had fish that died, and it was heartbreaking. And I felt like such a failure. I had to go through those things in order to be in right relationship with myself in relation to these beautiful little beings that are counting on me, for the temperature of their water and the cleanliness and the food. They're counting on me, but they don't know. They don't know they're counting on me. And then I have my dog, Gracie. And Gracie and I have been together for 12 years. And she's the one that's been most challenging for me because she's the one that requires conscious attention. She'll come and say, "Hey, let's go play." And I'll go, "Okay, let's go play." And then she's standing at the door ready to go. And I'm saying, "Well, I have to finish this, and then I have to finish this, and I have to go to the bathroom, and I have to," and I just, I'm not aligned with her. I'm not in agreement. I said I would go. So now she's ready. And now I'm doing stuff. And I've been in relationships with people who did that to me, and I hated it. And here I'm doing it to my dog, and my dog is just like, whatever. But for me, it's like I'm not honoring my agreement. And so this is still for me part of living alone, and at the same time cultivating these capacities to know myself in alignment with my highest truth and my highest good, and that of every being around me. And so when I'm not in alignment with my word, with my dog, that affects me. That affects me. She can go and lay down, or she'll go, whatever, whenever you get around to it, let's go. But for me, I'm out of alignment with myself. So living alone, there's this balance between, again, living with people and being so focused on taking care of those people because they're more important than me and what I need. And then there's me with my dog, and it's like I'm more important than her. It's like, yeah, there's got to be a way. How do I honor myself? How do I honor myself in these relationships? And so plant, fish, dog, I'm learning so much from these relationships. And it's helps me because the complexity of relationships with family and friends, or clients, or people in the community or my neighbors, it's very complex. But we just think it's normal. We just try to do our best because we go, oh, I should be more able to. And the fact of the matter is, I think we sometimes need a time out from all of the peopleness so that we can get clear and aligned with ourselves. I think that that's a perk of the pandemic, is that some of the social isolation has helped people get clearer about how they've been making choices in terms of relationships with themselves. It's all about our relationships with ourselves in relation to other people, places, and things. And so when we're socially isolated, we become more conscious of what's true, what do I need. So the other big piece of this, I think, is one of the there's 14 thoughts all coming up for me at the same time. So we live alone. So many people live alone, but we're not alone 24/7. And I mentioned that before. Some people go to work, or they go to the gym or the yoga, or they go visit their parents or take care of people, or they're out and about doing what they do. So it's not as if we're home alone 24/7, though there are people who are home alone 24/7. But generally, we're out and about, and we're here too. My life is that my home is my office. So I see clients, do Zoom, those kinds of things here. And so I sleep here and I eat here mostly. And I have my clients here in Zoom and sometimes personally. But sometimes I'm here too much and alone because I'm here. And so I'm out. I go to my friend Marge and Fred's, and I go there. That's where I do my painting. It's sort of my painting studio has been there. So I go there to paint, or I go there for interactions with them and eat and play together. And so that's an important part of my well-being. And so learning what is part of your well-being, what is it you need, really helps you get to know yourself and then engage with yourself in the world in a way that's really truthful about that. Um, Even though I'm at their house so much and doing my painting, the painting is really important to me. So creativity, we've got plants and fish and dogs and people, but there's a part of us that needs a creative outlet too. And I think that's part of this learning how to be living alone, is that we can begin to access not what we need to do for work or children, or to pay bills, or to be in partnership, but it's like, what is it that fuels me? What's the creative outlet? How do I want to be an expression into the world? Um, I knit and I write, and I also do things like this, YouTube videos, and I paint. So those are really important uh, creative outlets for me, the ways that I express myself in the world. My teaching, my coaching, those are expressions of me in the world. And a dilemma for people, I think, who live alone is that sometimes they can get, again, contracted or constricted. And hello, David. I'm glad you're here. In that constrictedness, they begin to shut down or resist expanding or trying new things or developing or cultivating new creative skills. Uh, Quite often, when people are in recovery from substances or relationships or whatever, uh, creativity is really important. And I've heard this from a number of people who've been in recovery. This one client of mine had this picture, and I go, wow, that's really cool. And he said, yeah, I painted that, or I drew that. And I went, that's awesome. And he goes, yeah, I want to do more, but I haven't. And it's like, it's so much a part of it's a good therapy, if you will. It really shifts our sense of self, it connects us with something that's bigger than us, even though it's just perhaps a drawing or a painting. There's this creativity is really, really important. Knitting is something I do. It's not one of my passions, but there's something about it that's really engaging, and um, the mindful one stitch at a time creates something. It creates, I've just finished this huge sweater. It was a year and a half of knitting over time. It's this amazing this amazing thing, piece of clothing that happened one stitch at a time. And I didn't know a lot of it. I didn't know how to do. I just would watch YouTube videos and learn by trial and error. But each stitch led to the next stitch, which led to the next row, and it went on and on until I had um, this completed sweater. It's the same. I'm going to show you a couple. Just show them because they're here. This is a painting that I did because it inspired me. It's like, I want to know how to do that. And I wanted to learn I wanted to know how to make a bowl that looked like a bowl. And so I painted this because I wanted to know what it was like. How do you create a flat piece of board canvas, and how do you make it look round? So I was inspired to try it. And so this is my little fish, Larry. Uh, so um, that was important. So being inspired to try things, and it might not be um, hello, Ronald. Um, um, I have this thing where it says this message is held for review. I don't know who Ronald Barber is, but I think it's not something that's we want here. So my point is that we can be inspired to create. We can be inspired to expand or extend ourselves into the world, even though we're home. We can do that through beading or jewelry or knitting or crafts or painting or food. Whatever it is that's inspiring to you is where you can engage with yourself in this in such a way that brings about fulfillment. And quite often people are afraid to do that. They're afraid to start. It's like, oh, I don't know how to do that, or I'm not going to be very good at it, or I don't know how to, I've never been good at drawing, or I've never been good at, and the point is that no, you don't know how to do it. And no, you may not have been good at it, but if you're inspired, why not start and see? I've been going to a knitting night, and I started going to knitting night because I started going to knitting night because my life got a little bit small. It's like aside from going to Marge and Fred's and doing painting and being with them, my life just got kind of small. So I wanted to go out in the world a little bit. So I started going to knitting night, and there's this fellow there. His name is Matt, and Matt crochets. He lives on another island, and to get to knitting night, he has to drive an hour, get on the ferry, takes an hour and a half, then 20 minutes to get into town. And then he's here with us for an hour and a half. And then he has to go back and do the same thing. That's commitment. But so Matt has been crocheting for years. I think he's probably about 50, I would say. And he's just delighted with it. And he's inspired by watching people knit. But he's like, oh man, it's so hard. I can't do it. It's just too complicated, right? And he uses this one needle, the crochet hook, and whatever, and he creates these amazing things. And what I listen to, and my point in saying that is, he has this. He's inspired by watching people knit. And yet he goes, "Ooh, can't do that. The first time that I did it was too hard." But he has the capacity to do other things. For instance, use the crochet hook and yarn. Now, my point in saying that is that in living alone, we're given a lot of opportunities. We can take opportunities, or we can create those opportunities to see what engages us in a way that feels fulfilling. And again, that might be crafts or arts or food or exercise and yoga and meditation. It might be spiritual practices. It might be reading or educating or learning languages. Whatever it is that inspires you is the point. It's like, well, I've got this opportunity. I've got this time on my hands. I don't have anything. I don't have anyone particularly that I have to take care of. I could use that time to do something else. It's something that might be of interest. And so we have that capacity to make or create, which is a way of, again, being ourselves and extending ourselves and expanding ourselves in the world. I was listening to Paul Selig the other night, and one of the things that I loved about what he said is that when, for instance, in creating a painting, the artist, she or he has a vibrational resonance or a level of consciousness that they have. Every single one of us has a level of consciousness. And when an artist or a person who's painting or cooking food or making jewelry, they their pieces are imbued with the vibration and the resonance of the artist. So even though this painting at some point may go to somebody else, I give a lot of my paintings away, the vibration of me is still in those paintings. And I love that, because it's not like, oh, here's this pretty picture, put it in your house, but it's actually a resonance of me that's going to somebody that continues. And people who cook and love to cook, and people who enjoy their cooking says, oh my gosh, there's just so much love in this food. You can feel it. It's tangible. So that's a cool thing about when we're learning and when we're making things or creating. It's not just like, oh yeah, I created that and it's just going to go away, but it's imbued with you and the vibration of you, and it goes into the world as a tangible or even non-tangible reflection, not reflection, but a true sense of yourself going into the world. I love that. So there's lots of ways that we have to use our time and use our capacities. We don't have to be frustrated and depressed and lonely. We can go, okay, how's my life going? Is this feel like the way that I want my life to be? We might, again, like I said, have an intention to go out into the world, or perhaps have a partnership someday. But right now it's not, we don't have that partnership, or we don't have the family around, or we're disconnected because we are in a new situation. So how can I extend myself into the world? How can I expand myself in a way that still stays in fulfillment of my own truth? So it's a big challenge. I realize that I love my home. I live in 385 square feet. It's a very small house. I have 10 acres around me. I love that. And I sometimes run out of things to do here. So I go play. I'll call my friends and say, hey, what are you doing? Or find something else to do that is fulfilling. I can fill my days with solitaire or games, or I can fill my day with watching YouTubes or videos or social media stuff. But I don't find that is really fulfilling to my essential nature. It can take up time. And as some people say, I'm just wasting time here, just wasting time. And it's like, wow, for me, at this stage in my life, it's like, I don't want to waste a minute of it. And I have to be conscious of, if that's true, then how might I be wasting my minutes or my time? And how do we create that sense of quality being for ourselves? Because this is a time that we have to learn who we are and to grow our capacity to know ourselves, and grow our capacity to know ourselves as a spiritual being who's here learning lessons. And for me, the biggest lesson is um, knowing who I am, knowing my who I am, not only in terms of the physical or the personal or the identity, but myself as the divine and as a spiritual being like everyone else. And how do I be a reflection of that? Not only a reflection, but a resonance of that divinity. I want that for myself, and I want that for you. I want that for everyone. So, where we're wasting time or where we're filling time, oh, I'm just doing this because I don't have anything else to do. It's like, can we think about that differently so that we're willing to make a different choice? And that choice being in alignment with the fulfillment of our human spirit, expanding and extending ourselves. In the Course in Miracles, it says we could extend into the world or we contract. That's pretty much it. We're extending or contracting. And even when we're in a state of rest, if we're in a state of deep contentment, rest, that's even an extension of ourselves because we're allowing ourselves to relax and allowing ourselves to be. Where when we're in that state of contraction, and this is a big practice for me right now because I find myself in a it's hard for me to relax. It's hard for me to let go of the sense of responsibility and I should be busy and all of those things. So I'm working hard at going, I don't want to live that way. I want to live in a state of deep contentment and that sense of that I'm expanding myself. Not by doing. It's not what I do. It's my state of being. But my state of being might say, I think I'll go out and, you know, cut some trees or cut some limbs on the trees or, work with a hoe or, I'll go out and clean the shed. But it's from that state of being of expansion and delight and inspiration, not from, the drudgery of having to do those things. And so it's a state of mind. It's a state of being. It's a state of truth of what works for you and what doesn't. I want to mention before I forget, thank you guys for your thumbs up. Really appreciate it. And if you haven't subscribed already and you find this valuable, please subscribe and let other people know about what I'm offering. Leave a comment below if you'd like. Let us know, because those of us who live alone, you might have a comment that really is supportive in a way that other people have yet to share. But I also wanted to mention that I have a boot camp called Inward Bound Boot Camp to Self-Transformation, and it's free and it's on YouTube. And the link is below. It's 20 videos over 4 weeks, but you can do it as quickly or little as you want to. It's about 10 minutes each session. And it really is supportive in helping you in any life situation, but it's really about learning the skills of cultivating consciousness so that you can make the choices and have that self-transformation that you may be looking for or desiring. So I just want to mention that. Any thoughts from you guys today about what I'm talking about? Again, when we're living alone, it doesn't mean that we are alone. It just means that currently that our situation is such that we are alone when we're alone, but we're not when we're not. And it doesn't mean we are isolated. It means that we are at choice to how do we create those relationships, as opposed to being, I live with my parents because I'm afraid to live alone. I live with my my sister because that sense of being afraid to live alone versus um, I don't want to live alone. I don't want to live alone. If I had the right person, I probably wouldn't want to live alone. I'd want to live with that person, but that person isn't here. That reflects that relationship or compatibility or whatever that says, yeah, this is great. I like living with somebody. But my sleeping is, I'm a restless sleeper. I'm a light sleeper. I toss and turn and I'm awake and, don't like snoring. I probably snore. I think I wake up my dog on occasion snoring. She sometimes has come over and pawed me in the middle of the night. And I go, oh, okay, I guess I was snoring. But to live with another person, sleep with another person, it doesn't make sense because I would be distracting to their sleep and they may be just distracting to my sleep. But living with people, there's all kinds of ways to do that. It doesn't mean I have to live alone for the rest of my life. There's all kinds of ways to make that happen. But being at choice about that versus I don't want to live alone, so I'm going to be in a relationship that makes me unhappy, which then makes the other person unhappy. What's the sense in that? It's like, well, I'm afraid to be alone. It's like, well, okay. And do you want to make some choices about that? Do you want to learn to not be afraid to live alone? Do you want to learn ways to have it be a fulfilling life and be in that in the state of living alone? For now, it's a choice. So I started out talking about being alone, but then beginning to invite in plants or animals so that you can learn how you be you in relation to a plant, your level of truth, your level of commitment, your level of presence to that. My level of presence to my fish. I don't spend hours with my fish. I feed them in the morning. I see them swimming around in the afternoon and the evening when the light's on, and I love it. They bring me infinite joy, and they're happy doing what they're doing, I suspect, because they're still alive doing what they're doing. So that infinite joy is really an important part of what I want to cultivate in my life with whoever and whatever is in my life. If it's not infinitely pleasing, I want to question that for myself. Marge says, I love the idea that when I'm content is when I'm in expansion. I'm feeling very content right now. Excellent. Good to know. Good to hear. I think for me, I'm learning. It's a training, and we think that if you watch this video, you're going to be inspired to make some choices or think about how you're being in your own life and the choices that you want to make. It doesn't mean those choices are going to be easy, and it doesn't mean like, oh, great, I made that choice and now I'm in this contentment, and boy, it feels great. And because we have to grow the sustainability, we've got to grow the ability to hold that vibration or that resonance or that truth for ourselves. And it takes courage, it takes strength, it takes conviction, it takes discipline, all those words that most of us don't like. It's like, yuck. But if I don't be intentional and mindful, my mind goes back to the old patterns of sad, bad, mad, bitter, lonely, unhappy. And that's where I go because that's how I'd been for most of my life. So learning to say, okay, that's a thought that's going to get me unhappy. That's a thought. That's a thought. And noticing those thoughts and say, stop those thoughts and bring myself into contentment as best I can and peace and joy. That's a practice. It doesn't come easily all the time. Sometimes rarely. I have to work at it. And to go, I went through some PTSD stuff, and it was like really grabbing for the light, if you will, because this PTSD. I got triggered into this dark and sad and scared and alone and nobody's here and all that kind of stuff. And I had to kind of pull myself up, up until I've got my head up and then a little bit more. And so over the weeks and months, actually, I've brought myself to this, but I have to train myself to keep my mind in alignment with what I know is my highest truth, my highest good, and extending again, I keep extending into more faith and of the divine of all that is, and the support that's always here. Those are concepts that are really scary and hard when you're alone. You're going, nobody's here. Nobody's here. I'm totally responsible for this, and it's all going to fall apart. What's that? It's like, yeah, I got to stop all that and start to function in a different way. Quite often, when we make changes like this and we feel that sense of loss and aloneness, this is quite often when people begin to begin to focus on a more spiritual path and a faith-based, where we have to turn our will over or turn over our resistance to change, turn all of this over because it gets to be overwhelming. We can't handle it on our own. We need something bigger than ourselves. Let's see. So again, I want to mention that we have relationships with our friends and family, and we can become, when we're living alone, and you might be in relationship with marriage or whatever and still have a sense of identification of, hey, I'm myself, and so I get to choose who I want to be with or how I want to be in the world, without saying, oh, I'm married and so I can't make any choices without my partner telling me what he wants or she wants or whatever. But it's like, yeah, no, I'm an individuated person. So I want to learn how to look at myself from this state of being individuated, and that I make choices that are aligned with my truth, even though my partner may have different ideas of what that looks like. So even when we're in partnership or with families, we still have the capacity to look at how do I be in relationship with myself in an honoring way, so that I can be with a plant or fish or my creativity. My creativity is so important to me. It's in the more that I grow myself into a more spiritually based person, that creativity is a constant. That creativity is the expansion of me and the extension of me in the world, regardless if anybody sees it or not. Doesn't matter. It's that extension of me into something and some expression of myself. That's what's important. When I'm watching a TV show that I love watching Ted Lasso on Apple TV, because it brings me into an extension of myself of love and kindness and humor and playfulness and delight. Or if I'm watching a Christmas movie, it brings me into that sense of believing in something greater than myself and the delight. Or romantic comedies, it brings me into myself, as opposed to watching violent things or scary things that now I'm in rigidity and contraction, and I don't like that feeling. I don't want it in my life. And the more I'm aware of that, then I'm aware of where I might be in relationship with people that create that sense of and I go, okay, how do I shift that? How do I mindfully be aware of my participation perhaps in that? Or how I may choose not to go to places or be around people who have that whatever that I'm like, there's a lot of talk about negativity around because of the COVID and the all the virus stuff and all the climate changes and cold weather, hot weather, whatever it is. And it's like, oh, it's just like, but it gets to a point where it's like, I start to contract. I don't want to be in that contraction, but that contraction is part of my reality. It's like, okay, how do I want to be with that? It's like, okay, I can distance myself or I can just calm myself with it. I don't have to get upset about it, be offended by it. Just go, that's interesting. And then be a choice. What do I want to do about that? Do I want to leave? Do I want to just ignore? Do I want to go in the other room? It's all kinds of things. But when we're able to be at choice about that and say, I don't really want to be around that. When President Trump was the president, it was like I didn't want to be around any conversation about that because I couldn't handle it. And, was there a fault or is there a problem with me? Doesn't matter. It just is like, I don't want to be around that. And we come to be at choice about that for ourselves to say that doesn't make me happy to be in those conversations. A lot of people who are vaccinated or non-vaccinated in that conversation, it's like, I can't go there because it's not peaceful for me. It doesn't contribute to my well-being. And that's okay to know that and to say that because that's the truth. So again, the intention of this particular live today is to talk about how we get to know who we are. And in this particular case, in relation to companions, family, friends, puppy dogs, cats, fish, whatever it is that is of honoring to you. And the same with how do we express ourselves in the world? How do we contribute energetically or vibrationally through our own creations in the world that brings love and peace into our hearts or fulfillment or contentment? And that, in essence, then shifts the world just because we're happier. We're happier and fulfilled in that creation process, and that extends into the world. So I think that's pretty much for me. Any questions or thought? David, I don't know if you're still here. But if you are, I'd love to hear anything that you guys have to say. So let's see, next week, next Thursday. So next Thursday will be the 30th, I believe, of December. I'll be talking about the spiritual lessons of living alone. So kind of talk about that a little bit, but we'll just go to the next level of that conversation and say, what are the spiritual lessons that are available through living alone? And again, a lot of what I'm saying, it doesn't have to be that you're living alone, but because we're all living alone, even though we're living with another person, if you know what I'm saying. And we have that opportunity to really question and look at ourselves as an individual in relation to ourselves, in relation to other people, places, or things. So that's pretty much it. Let's see. David says, thanks. Sometimes are the times to listen. Thanks, David. I appreciate that. Really do. All right. Well, for those of you celebrating the Christmas holidays, I hope that it is a blessed and peaceful time for you. And for everyone else, I hope it is a blessed and peaceful time for you. And I wish you the super best this week and always. All right. Sending you big hugs. Bye for now. My computer is a little slow in catching up here. So I'm saying goodbye, and it might take a few minutes for me to disappear. Let's see what happens here. I have to keep pressing the end stream button here. It's my am I off?
I don't know. Oh, is she talking to both of us now through YouTube?
She's still alive.
Okay, I'm gonna hang up with you, Margie. I'll be back.